Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Thursday, it's April 10th, 2025, and today is day 552 since October 7th of 2023. This is Thursday, it's the weekly summary. I wasn't able to do the live briefing this morning, so one of the staff from CMEP did it earlier today, for which I'm very grateful. But this is a summary of news from the past week. It includes some of the updates of the last 24 hours. I'm bringing this to you from Amman in Jordan. And while so much of the news is heart-wrenching and hard to listen to and overwhelming, I have to say that there are also things happening that are inspiring and beautiful and good. And the work that we're doing together as a community, as the body of Christ, but also across interfaith lines and with people of goodwill who want to see an end to violence, an end to death and destruction, who are showing empathy and goodwill towards all humanity, working to end the atrocities in Gaza. It's actually really beautiful, and I want you to be encouraged by that. I had several meetings like that today, both within the church context here in Amman, and also in the government. People who are ardently working diligently, late at night, many nights in a row, who are doing everything possible to seek a better future for the people of Gaza, not just here in Jordan, but for Palestinians, in ways that are in the best interest of the people of Israel, the entire Middle East, and for the world. It makes me think of Galatians 6, 9, and 10. Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have the opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. So don't give up. Keep seeking to do good. And when we make mistakes, we'll make mistakes as we go. We'll ask for forgiveness, say we're sorry, and pick up and keep going. I think many of you know I do these daily videos as much as a spiritual discipline, as a way to give witness to stories that need to be told, of the tens of thousands of Palestinian lives that have been lost in Gaza over the last more than a year and a half, of the lives that have been destroyed, of the devastation that's happening there, and also of Israelis who lost loved ones on October 7th, internationals who have suffered, more than the 1,100 people killed on October 7th, the violence in South Lebanon, those who are living in Syria with questions about what the future, of the new government might bring, the U.S. attacks that have continued on the Houthis in Yemen. All of these things are updates so that we can understand what's happening, so that we can know how to best pray, but also know how to respond. So a weekly update summarizing the news of the past week on this 552nd day, April 10th, 2025. In Gaza, earlier this week on Tuesday, there was an Israeli airstrike that hit a multi-story residential building. It was in East Gaza, and it killed at least 29 Palestinians, including children. Dozens were injured. Local health authorities reported that yesterday. The Israeli military said that they struck the multi-story residential building because they were targeting a senior Hamas terrorist. This is an example of part of the strategy that's been happening in Gaza, of collateral damage, where dozens are often killed, with the justification being seeking one particular target. The IDF and Shin Bet Security Service confirmed in a joint statement on Thursday that the strike in Shujaiya neighborhood in East Gaza City on Wednesday took the lives of at least 35 Palestinians. That this also killed the neighborhood's Hamas commander, Haitham Razek Abed al-Karim Sheikh Khalil. So a senior Hamas commander was killed, and 35 Palestinians also were killed in Shujaiya in a particular attack on East Gaza City's neighborhood on Wednesday. The IDF and Shin Bet confirmed that. All basic supplies in Gaza are running out, with the territory inching towards very, very deep hunger. This was communicated by the communications director for the UN Aid Agency for Palestinians. Similar assessments have been shared by other aid agencies that are operating in Gaza. This is not just the viewpoint of UNRWA. This is a widely held assessment by those who are working in the Gaza Strip. The Senate yesterday, on Wednesday, voted 53 to 46 to confirm the former Arkansas governor, Mike Huckabee, as the new United States ambassador to Israel. You might recall that Mike Huckabee said formerly that there is no such thing as Palestinians. Trump cites progress on Gaza hostage talks. That happened today. He said that there's progress being made on the hostage talks. We don't know specifically what that means. The last thing on the table, there were kind of two main things happening. There was a conversation about the possibility where Hamas had agreed to 5 or 6 hostages being released in exchange for prisoners. But the deal on the table for Israel with the U.S.'s backing was 9 hostages, including an additional, the American hostage, Aiden Alexander, in exchange for 40 days of a ceasefire. I don't know if that's what the current talks are about, but Trump said that progress has been made. There were no specific details. It was said that he was dealing with both Israel and Hamas, but he gave no specifics. The administration of Trump tried to negotiate the release of the American-Israeli hostage Aiden Alexander and the bodies of 4 slain hostages with U.S. citizenship with Hamas in March. We have heard that the U.S. did have an agreement with Hamas, but that Israel trumped it and said that that was unacceptable. This news report from the New York Times said Hamas did not accept it by the deadline set for the American officials. So the New York Times reported that on Thursday. In terms of specifics around the humanitarian situation in Gaza, essential medical equipment such as portable incubators, ventilators for the neonatal intensive care, ultrasound machines, oxygen pumps were reportedly not allowed entry into Gaza. In addition, 180,000 doses of routine childhood vaccines, enough to fully protect 60,000 children under the age of 2, have not been permitted to enter into Gaza. This leaves newborn children and young children without life-saving care that is urgently needed. The Ministry of Health in Gaza reported that while medical teams and ambulance crews continue to operate under life-threatening conditions to save multiple lives, 37% of medications and 59% of medical supplies are at zero stock. This includes medications for operating rooms, intensive care units, emergency departments that have been depleted to unprecedented levels, with higher percentages of critical medications being at zero stock, such as 54% of medications for cancer treatment, 40% of those for primary care, and 51% of medicines for maternal and child health. According to OSHA, 65% of Gaza is now either in Israel's expanded buffer zone or under displacement orders. That means no Palestinians are allowed to go in those particular areas. And if they do, they often will be, the orders are shoot to kill. They report that almost all flour distribution has stopped and all subsidized bakeries have been shut down as a result of the total blockade on aid that began March 2nd. The North Mekarot water pipeline was damaged last week during Israel's incursion into the area. There have been many requests to coordinate movements to be able to access the line to repair it, but those requests have been denied. And according to the Norwegian Refugee Council, the shelter response is approaching a complete standstill because we have almost nothing left to distribute, despite still seeing massive forced transfers happening every day, sometimes multiple times a day. OSHA reports that as of March 27th, all UNRWA international staff have left Gaza, meaning that the staff that remains is all local staff. All internationals for UNRWA have left. And the report analysis displacement orders, according to Kisha, an Israeli human rights organization, in other words, evacuation orders, have affected 9 in 10 Gaza residents in the period since October 7th. At their peak, 86% of the territory has been displaced. From the first week of the war in October 2023 until January 2025, Israel issued at least 105 evacuation orders over social media channels of the military spokesperson and Kogat. The report also highlights Kisha's legal analysis of the invalidity of the evacuation orders and the illegality of Israel's strikes in the area it designated as a humanitarian zone. We'd encourage you to take a look at Kisha's full report. Today in Israel, 23 people were arrested near Haifa in anti-government protests This was a small anti-government demonstration. Despite not blocking roads or engaging in any riot-like behavior, Israeli police officers arrested 23, quote, rioters who held signs and called out slogans criticizing Israel and its actions because it was said that these people jeopardized public safety. The protesters held anti-war signs that said things like stop the starvation, stop the genocide, and stop the war of destruction. Israel's High Court issued an interim order this week, pausing Benjamin Netanyahu's attempt to fire the Shin Bet intelligence chief. This was Ronan Bar, giving the Israeli government until April 20th to come up with a compromise to the dispute. Demanding the prosecution of the Israeli Defense Forces for the killing of aid workers in Gaza, about 360 Israeli medical professionals, half of them doctors, signed a letter demanding the investigation into the killing of the 15 aid workers in the Gaza Strip that happened 2.5 weeks ago. This letter also demanded their prosecution. These physicians and medical workers said, "We are shocked by this grave incident. The killing of rescue and medical personnel on duty is a blatant violation of international warfare laws and an act contrary to human morality." In a statement released by the Hostage Family Forum, this happened today, the Israeli hostage Karina Ariev called on Israelis to leave an empty chair in solidarity with the Israeli hostages that still remain in Gaza. So she was a hostage that was released in one of the exchanges. She said, "I'm asking you during this holiday to leave an empty chair for hostages. Do not forget them." Passover begins this weekend. During the Seder, we read the verse, "In every generation, a person must see themselves as if they personally left Egypt," Ariev said. The meaning changes after you experience captivity. Although I am here, my heart is still there. There are still 59 hostages waiting for their freedom holiday, waiting to be brought home. Of the 59 hostages, I don't have the exact number, but it's believed that only 24 or so of them are still alive. In terms of the Houthis, there are suspected U.S. airstrikes that killed at least 6 people and injured 16 others earlier this week. According to reports from Houthi rebels, the U.S. military central command did not acknowledge the strikes, but the U.S. has been striking the Houthis for weeks now. Just a couple of days ago, it was also reported that suspected U.S. airstrikes pounded Yemen's Red Sea and the port city of Hodeidah, and that at least 10 people were killed by U.S. airstrikes. The area is home to the city's airport. Houthis in the past have used that area to target shipping in the Red Sea. Since its start at the beginning of the U.S. airstrikes, targeting the Houthis, because the Houthis are saying that they are bombing ships in the Red Sea that are headed or involved in Israel because of what's going on in Gaza. U.S. airstrikes have killed roughly 107 people in Yemen. Those are the casualty figures that were released Wednesday of this week. In Syria, the Islamic State has showed renewed vigor. This has been one of the big concerns about the vacuum after the Assad regime fell. The Islamic State has showed renewed vigor in Syria with increased numbers of attacks, raising the risk that it could find a way to free thousands of hardened fighters who are held in prisons that are guarded by U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish fighters. This is according to UN and U.S. officials. One of the big concerns is that some of the funding for these prisons is some of the funding that recently had been cut by the Trump administration. Netanyahu met with Donald Trump this week. Trump said that the U.S. will hold direct talks this weekend with Iran over nuclear weapons programs. Netanyahu again expressed support for the Trump's plan to impose U.S. control over the Gaza Strip and to encourage Palestinians to relocate out of the territory. Having a peace force like the U.S. there controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing, Trump said. Earlier this week, it was announced that the U.S. would have indirect talks, but just today, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio said that there will be direct talks between Witkoff and a top leader of Iran on Saturday. As of the latest reports I read, Iran said that talks would be indirect. I've not seen direct talks confirmed from Iran. Israel would be the leader of a potential military strike on Iran if the Washington-Tehran nuclear program fails. Trump said that yesterday. A Russian foreign ministry spokesperson asked the U.S. about U.S. warnings to Iran, saying that bombing will not pave the way to peace. That was a Russian foreign ministry spokesperson, and that Tehran was taking preventative measures. Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Defense Secretary, said it's up to Iran to decide whether the recent U.S. movements of B-2 bombers is a message to Tehran, as he voiced hope that the U.S.-Iran negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program could be resolved peacefully. The U.S. has continued to send increasing amounts of military, not only to support not only in terms of sales to Israel, but direct U.S. military presence in the Middle East has increased significantly over past weeks. Armenia and Iran are set to hold joint military drills amid regional tensions and nuclear talks. That was supposed to conclude after 2 days of military exercises. They share a border, Iran and Armenia. That was supposed to conclude today. There have been tensions over Iran's nuclear program. And also tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We work on that issue, particularly in the area of Nagorno-Karabakh. The Treasury Department yesterday imposed new sanctions on entities and individuals linked to the Iran nuclear program. This is, of course, days before those talks are supposed to start. And 48 U.S. service members, contractors, civilians, and relatives of people who were injured or lost family members in Middle East strikes yesterday just filed a federal lawsuit against Iran and North Korea, saying that the two countries have provided funding, weapons, and training to militant groups that targeted U.S. troops. So some of those are Iranian-backed groups. They also included North Korea. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service today announced that it will start screening immigrants and their social media accounts for anti-Semitic content as a grounds for denying entry. This is a new policy that will apply to immigrants that are applying for lawful permanent residence, foreign students, and immigrants affiliated with educational institutions linked to anti-Semitic activity. Havoc's been wreaked on the global markets this week because of the U.S. tariffs being imposed. Trump paused the higher tariff rates for most countries for up to 90 days, while he raised tariffs on China. Of course, this will have significant impacts on the Middle East, including Jordan, Israel, and other states. And a Louisiana immigration judge yesterday said she'll terminate the case against the Columbia University student Mahmoud Khalil if the government doesn't provide evidence this week that would justify its attempts to deport him. Now, listen to what happened today. So pressed for evidence about why Mahmoud Khalil should be deported, there was a response today from our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. The federal government, Marco Rubio, sends a 2-page memo. This was obtained by the Associated Press. It does not allege that Khalil has committed any criminal conduct. But as a legal permanent U.S. resident and a graduate student, he's married to an American, by the way, who served, that's my understanding, he served as a spokesperson for campus activists last year during large demonstrations against Israel's treatment of Palestinians and the war on Gaza. Rubio wrote that Khalil could be expelled for his beliefs. He said that while Khalil's activities were otherwise lawful, letting him remain in the country would undermine, quote, U.S. policy to combat anti-Semitism around the world and in the U.S., in addition to efforts to protect Jewish students from harassment and violence in the U.S. Condoning anti-Semitic conduct and disruptive protests in the U.S. would severely undermine that significant foreign policy objective. The submission was filed yesterday after Judge Cummins ordered the government to produce evidence against Khalil ahead of a hearing tomorrow on whether or not Khalil can continue to be detained during immigration proceedings. We'll wait and see what happens there. The New Jersey governor and senator have demanded answers from Israel after the Palestinian American teenager was killed this last week in the West Bank by the IDF. So local leaders in New Jersey are demanding that Israel thoroughly investigate the killing of a 14-year-old Palestinian American dual citizen by IDF troops in the West Bank. The young man's name is Amr Mohammed Sadi Rabi. He was originally from Saddlebrook, New Jersey. He was shot and killed near Termis Aya. The Israeli army stated that he and other teens were throwing stones or rocks at passing cars. It's hard for me not to make comments about, oh, let's, kill him. I mean, to be shot and killed for any reason, but the fact that Palestinians are killed with impunity sometimes is just too much. There was a 10-second video that's purported to show the incident, the local council of the village where it happened rejected the Army's characterization and said that the boys were picking almonds. The village council said there were settlers in the area who were firing shots, making it unclear whether or not the gunfire came from the army or settlers, and that the Israeli Defense Forces did not comment on whether or not there were settlers in the area at the time. Churches for Middle East Peace put out a statement condemning his death and calling on the U.S. to demand an investigation and accountability. I would call you, as I did earlier this week, to pray for the Christians of Gaza. Maybe it was in my daily update yesterday, but I gave an update from Father Gabriele Romanelli, who is the parish priest. I've had the privilege of meeting him the last time I was in Gaza in 2022. He was not in Gaza during October 7th, but he returned after that day to be with his parish community at the Holy Family Church in Gaza. He said in a recent article in the Vatican News, in our traumatic reality, where we live is essentially a cage. Pope Francis continues to call, and he said the calls mean so much to us. He and his parish continue to pray for peace. So pray for Father Romanelli, all of the Christians in the Holy Family Parish, Saint Porphyrius, for all in Gaza, for all in the occupied Palestinian territories. Pray for all who are diligently working for the violence and the atrocities to be brought to an end. Pray for all who are suffering under the current realities. Pray that the negotiations would proceed, that there could be a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire and negotiations that would work towards a lasting and permanent settlement, that positive progress would be made and that peace would come quickly. I wanted to leave you with the words of Howard Zinn. He wrote one of my favorite history books, The People's History of the United States, which, by the way, would not be allowed to be taught under this current administration. But Howard Zinn wrote these words: to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an indefinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is in and of itself a marvelous victory. May we live in such defiance. To live now as we think human beings should live. May it be so in the name of Christ. Amen.